Imagine a world where the color of your skin determines where you can learn, where the doors to a better education are locked simply because of who you are. For millions of Americans, this wasn't imagination, it was the harsh reality of a nation divided by segregation. This is the story of a monumental battle for justice, a fight that would reshape America forever. This is the story of Brown versus the Board of Education. Our story begins not in a grand courtroom, but in the heart of a community in Topeka, Kansas, during the early 1950s. America was a country of contradictions, a beacon of freedom to the world, yet deeply fractured by racial inequality. The legal foundation for this division was a doctrine known as separate but equal, established by the 1896 Supreme Court case, Plessy v. Ferguson. This ruling declared that segregating public facilities was constitutional, as long as the separate facilities for Black and white Americans were equal. But in practice, separate was never equal. For African Americans, this meant enduring substandard schools, hospitals, and public spaces. In education, the disparity was glaring. Black schools were often underfunded, overcrowded, and lacked basic resources like new textbooks, proper heating, or even indoor plumbing. The message this sent to Black children was clear and damaging: you are less than. You are not worthy of the same opportunities. It was a psychological burden, a daily reminder of a society that judged them not by their character, but by the color of their skin. But in Topeka, one family decided to challenge this injustice. Meet the Browns. Oliver Brown, an ordinary man, a welder, a minister, a father, wanted something extraordinary for his daughter, Linda. Linda was a bright, curious third grader. The elementary school closest to her home, Sumner Elementary, was a modern, well-equipped building just a few blocks away. But it was for white children only. Instead, Linda had to walk past it every day, cross dangerous railroad tracks, and take a long bus ride to get to the all-black Monroe Elementary School. For Oliver Brown, this wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a profound injustice. Why should his daughter be denied a quality education at a school she could see from her own neighborhood? He saw the separate but equal doctrine for what it was, a lie designed to maintain a system of racial hierarchy. He believed his daughter, and every child like her, deserved better. He was not alone. Across the country, other parents in similar situations were feeling the same frustration, the same righteous anger. The NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, had been fighting segregation for decades, chipping away at the Plessy doctrine through the courts. Their legal team, led by the brilliant and tireless Thurgood Marshall, saw an opportunity. They organized a class action lawsuit, bringing together 13 parents, including Oliver Brown, to represent their children and challenge school segregation in Topeka. The case, officially known as Oliver L. Brown et al. V. The Board of Education of Topeka was ready to begin its long journey to the Supreme Court. Thurgood Marshall was a legal giant, a man whose life's work was dedicated to dismantling institutional racism. He and his team understood this was more than just a legal argument, it was a moral one. They weren't just fighting for access to better buildings, they were fighting to affirm the humanity and dignity of Black children. Their strategy was bold and groundbreaking. They would argue that segregation, by its very nature, was psychologically harmful and inherently unequal, regardless of the physical conditions of the schools. To prove this, they presented powerful evidence, including the now famous doll tests. Conducted by psychologists Kenneth and Mamie Clark, these experiments showed young Black children a set of identical dolls, one white and one black. The children were asked a series of questions: which doll is the nice doll? Which one is the bad doll? Which one looks like you? Overwhelmingly, the children attributed positive characteristics to the white doll and negative ones to the black doll. Tragically, many of them identified the bad doll as the one that looked like them. This was devastating proof of the internalized shame and sense of inferiority that segregation instilled in children from a very young age. The case, along with similar cases from South Carolina, Virginia, Delaware, and Washington, D.C., was bundled together and finally reached the highest court in the land, the United States Supreme Court. The legal battle that ensued was intense. The arguments were heard in 1952, but the justices were deeply divided. The stakes were incredibly high. A ruling against segregation would not only overturn decades of legal precedent but would also challenge the very fabric of society in many parts of the country. Recognizing the gravity of their decision, the court decided to rehear the arguments the following year. During this critical period, a significant change occurred. Chief Justice Fred Vinson, who seemed inclined to uphold segregation, passed away. President Dwight D. Eisenhower appointed Earl Warren, the governor of California, as the new Chief Justice. Warren was not seen as a judicial radical, but he possessed a strong moral compass and a belief in fairness. He understood that the court needed to speak with a single, unified voice on this issue. A split decision would only deepen the nation's divisions and weaken the ruling's authority. Behind the scenes, Chief Justice Warren worked tirelessly to build consensus among the justices. He appealed not just to legal arguments, but to their sense of morality and justice. He reminded them of the fundamental principles of American democracy and the message that segregation sent to the world. He believed that the time had come for the law to catch up with the promise of equality. Then, on May 17, 1954, the moment arrived. The chamber of the Supreme Court was filled with anticipation. Chief Justice Earl Warren began to read the court's decision. His words would echo through history. We come then to the question presented: does segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race deprive the children of the minority group of equal educational opportunities? We believe that it does. He went on, addressing the core of the issue. To separate them from others of similar age and qualifications solely because of their race generates a feeling of inferiority as to their status in the community that may affect their hearts and minds in a way unlikely ever to be undone. We conclude that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. The decision was unanimous. 9-0. It was a stunning and decisive victory for civil rights. The highest court in the land had declared that segregating children in public schools was unconstitutional. The legal pillar supporting segregation for over half a century had been shattered. For Thurgood Marshall, the Brown family, and countless others who had fought for so long, it was a moment of profound triumph and hope. The news spread like wildfire across the nation and the world. It was a promise of a new dawn, a step toward fulfilling America's long-deferred dream of equality for all. However, the victory in the courtroom did not immediately translate to equality in the classroom. The court's implementation ruling a year later, known as Brown 2, called for desegregation to proceed with all deliberate speed. This vague language was exploited by segregationists, who initiated a period of massive resistance. States passed laws to circumvent the ruling, and in many places, the process of desegregation was met with violence, intimidation, and fierce political opposition. We remember the images of the Little Rock Nine, brave students who faced angry mobs just to attend a white high school in Arkansas, needing the protection of federal troops. The path to integrated schools was long, difficult, and often dangerous. It required continued legal battles, the courage of everyday citizens, and the unwavering persistence of the civil rights movement. But the Brown v. Board of Education decision was the catalyst. It was a moral declaration that ignited a movement and gave it unstoppable legal and moral authority. It laid the groundwork for landmark legislation like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It inspired a generation of activists to demand the full rights of citizenship. Today, the legacy of Brown v. Board of Education is all around us. It is a testament to the power of ordinary people to achieve extraordinary change. It reminds us that the fight for justice is a marathon, not a sprint, and that progress is possible when we dare to challenge injustice. The story of Linda Brown, her father Oliver, and the brilliant legal mind of Thurgood Marshall teaches us that a more equal and just society is not just a dream, but a goal worth fighting for in every generation. The work is not finished, but the journey started on that day in 1954 continues to light our way forward. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories that have shaped our world.